Hi, my name is Toby Pierce, and I'd like to share a devotional thought with you today. We're almost finished with our journey through the book of Acts. We're beginning the last chapter, chapter 28 today. If you remember at the end of the last chapter, chapter 27, Paul was in a shipwreck with 276 other people. Paul was a prisoner and being taken to Rome. But they're in a shipwreck, and they're just off the coast of an island, and so some of the ones that can swim to the island, and the other ones get on debris from the ship and float and paddle their way over to the island. And so that brings us to chapter 28 and verse 1. After we were brought safely through, we learned that the island was called Malta. The native people showed us unusual kindness, for they kindled a fire and welcomed us all, because it had begun to rain and was cold. When Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and put them on the fire, a viper came out because of the heat and fastened on his hand. Really? Seriously? I mean, wait a minute. Paul has been in prison for over 2 years after being falsely accused. He's been starving on a ship and then shipwrecked and probably had to swim to the island still bound in chains, as far as we know. And now a viper bites him? Well, and obviously it was a poisonous snake, because just based on the reaction of the people, and we'll see that here in the next verse. But wow, after all that Paul had been through, he finally is kind of getting to maybe take a little bit of comfort and warm himself by the fire, though he's still in wet clothes. And a poisonous snake fastens itself on his hand. Have you ever had one of those times, maybe for months or for years, where everything just seems to go wrong? Just one thing after another? Did God forsake Paul here? No, of course not. Has God forsaken you when it seems like one thing after another is going wrong? Of course not. Well, so here's the reaction of the islanders when Paul gets bit by the snake. Verse 4, Acts 28. When the native people saw the creature hanging from his hand, they said to one another, "No doubt this man is a murderer. Though he has escaped from the sea, justice has not allowed him to live." So I think Paul was probably still in chains, but either way, it's obvious that he's one of the prisoners that was aboard the ship. So his reputation is going to be kind of questionable in the eyes of these islanders anyway. When they say that justice has not allowed him to live, the word justice in many Bibles is capitalized. Well, why? Well, because justice was not here just a concept of fairness or a legal term. There was a false god, or goddess in this case, named Justice. In their belief, she was the daughter of the false god Zeus. Well, justice punished wrongdoers, and the islanders interpreted Paul's snakebite as retribution by their false god Justice. So in some English translations, the word justice is capitalized to show that the islanders meant this goddess that they worshipped. Verse 5, he, Paul, He, however, shook off the creature into the fire and suffered no harm. They were waiting for him to swell up or suddenly fall down dead. But when they had waited a long time and saw no misfortune come to him, they changed their minds and said that he was a god. You know, it's not the first time that people had called Paul a god. Remember back in Acts chapter 14, Paul and Barnabas were in Lystra, and Paul heals a man that was lame from birth, and the people began calling Barnabas Zeus, and Paul they called Hermes. Well, we're not told here if the people on Malta associated Paul with any particular false god, or just considered him as a god in general because of what he did. But no doubt Paul would have reacted here much like he did in Lystra to let the people know that he's not a god, he's just a person just like themselves. Verse 7. Now in the neighborhood of that place were lands belonging to the chief man of the island named Publius, who received us and entertained us hospitably for 3 days. Now when Luke says us here, he could be talking about the 276 people that were on board the ship, or us as in Paul and me and maybe a few others. But since verse 2 says that the native people showed us unusual kindness, and back in verse 2, I mean, they're talking still even about like the whole ship and the prisoners and everybody. So it sure sounds like the people of Malta may have taken care of everyone. But what if suddenly we had 276 people just kind of drop in on us with nothing but wet clothes, the wet clothes that they were wearing? That's all they had. This was no small kindness of the people of Malta. Verse 8, it happened that the father of Publius lay sick with fever and dysentery, and Paul visited him and prayed, and putting his hands on him, healed him. And when this had taken place, the rest of the people on the island who had diseases also came and were cured. They also honored us greatly, and when we were about to sail, they put on board whatever we needed. These people on Malta were very kind. No doubt Paul took advantage of the time to tell them about Jesus, because while we should all be kind, kindness alone does not save you without Jesus. As the next verse tells us, Paul had 3 months to influence the people there on the island for Christ. Verse 11, and after 3 months, we set sail in a ship that had wintered in the island, a ship of Alexandria, with the twin gods as a figurehead. The twin gods, false gods, Castor and Pollux, were represented. In Greek mythology, they were the sons of Jupiter and the patron deities of sailors. Their images were likely carved, but maybe painted on the front of the ship. Have you ever had to work in a shop or travel somewhere where some false religion was prevalent? You know, Paul was a prisoner and was taken aboard this ship that was honoring false gods. There was no sin committed here by Paul for doing that. You know, if a store where you have to buy groceries has a statue of some idol out front, you're not sinning by purchasing your groceries there, as long as you don't worship the idol. Now Luke records the various ports that the ship stopped at. Verse 12, putting in at Syracuse, we stayed there for 3 days. And from there we made a circuit and arrived at Rhegium. And after 1 day, a south wind sprang up. And on the second day, we came to Puteoli. Well, so Italy is shaped like a boot. Remember that the island of Sicily looks like it is being kicked by the boot. The port of Syracuse is on the eastern side of Sicily, about a third of the way up from the south. There on Sicily. Well, Paul and the others were shipwrecked on the island of Malta, south of Sicily. So when they get on this other ship, they sail north along the eastern coast of Sicily and stop at Syracuse. From there, they sail between Italy and Sicily and stop at the toe of the boot in a city named Rhegium, if I'm saying it right. Next, they continue to travel north and land at a city called Puteoli. It's just above the angle of the boot on the western side of Italy. And the rest of the journey to Rome then could be on land. Verse 14, there at Puteoli, we found brothers and were invited to stay with them for 7 days. And so we came to Rome. And the brothers there, when they heard about us, came as far as the Forum of Appius and 3 taverns to meet us. On seeing them, Paul thanked God and took courage. And when we came into Rome, Paul was allowed to stay by himself with the soldier who guarded him. So brethren came from miles around to encourage Paul. They went out of their way to encourage someone. Paul, for his part, thanked God for them and took courage. Go out of your way to encourage someone today if you can. You'll bless them, and you'll find that you yourself will be blessed in the process. And so I hope you have a blessed day. Next time, we will finish the book of Acts. Again, I hope you have a blessed day.
If you would like more information, or if you'd like to participate in our Bible studies and worship services, we would love to have you come join us at the Northeast Church of Christ in Albuquerque, New Mexico.